Great, thanks, Tim. And thanks again for the opportunity to present to the Share Cafe webinar. So next slide, please. And again. Great. So I guess for those who haven't seen the ResApp story in the past, I want to give a little bit of an overview of where ResApp has come from and where we are today, importantly. So ResApp was originally spun out of the University of Queensland roughly 7 years ago. It was based on the work by Professor Udantha Abaratne, and Udantha invented a technology that looked for signatures inside of cough sounds. And so what he postulated was that a cough sound that came out of your lungs contained information about what was going on inside your lungs. And then we could use machine learning technology to pull out those signatures, those signals that are in that cough sound, and match that to particular diseases. And the real genesis of the ResApp technology was funding by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the Gates Foundation were very interested in understanding, could we use this technology to identify pneumonia in children? Pneumonia being the #1 killer of children, especially in the developing world. So over the last 7 years, we've developed this technology further and really have become now the world's leader in audio-based diagnosis of respiratory health. And as I said earlier, the technology looks for sound, looks for signatures in sound, whether it comes from a cough, whether it comes from breathing, whether it comes from snoring, and matches those signatures to different diseases, from pneumonia to asthma to COPD to sleep apnea, and now, which I'll talk about a lot today, is in COVID-19. We are a scientific-based company. We came out of the university, and so we run our clinical trials with leading institutions globally. We publish our results in peer-reviewed journals, and we actually now have regulatory approvals and products in the market in Australia and Europe. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what our base technology looks like. So this is ResApp DX. So this is our product that's in the market today, being used in Europe, Australia, and Asia to help clinicians diagnose respiratory disease. It uses that AI machine learning to identify signatures in cough sounds, differentially diagnose disease. One of the key benefits for what we do is that we only require a smartphone. So because we just rely on that sound, we can record that sound with the smartphone that's in your pocket. And that gives us a huge advantage, a huge distribution advantage to get this out to as many people as possible. As I said earlier, we have strong clinical evidence over clinical trials. We have publications in peer-reviewed journals, and we actually have regulatory approvals in Europe, Australia, and also in Asia. Just hit next, please. The technology is very simple to use. You simply hold the phone about an arm's length away. The patient coughs 5 times. Next, please. Enters a few details about their birth date, their gender. Next, please. What symptoms they may have, whether they have a fever, whether they have a runny nose. Next, please. And then we provide instantaneously a result, a diagnosis result based on all those inputs, based on the cough and the symptoms. So in this particular case, we've identified someone who has pneumonia. Next slide, please. So as we take ResApp DX to market, we're partnering with multiple different organizations in multiple markets to get the most bang for our buck, effectively. So here in Australia, we've partnered primarily with telehealth companies. We've partnered with CoView, Doctors on Demand, Phoenix Health, and we've recently partnered with health teams. And so these are different partners to allow us to access Australia through telehealth. So for example, CoView and Doctors on Demand. And in health teams, we're accessing the aged care market. So great opportunities there in Australia. In Europe, we were very fortunate to form a partnership with Medgate last year. Medgate are the leading telehealth providers in Europe, and we're now live on the Medgate platform, which is generating revenue for the company. Just last week, we signed an agreement with the NHS, with the Dartford and Gravesham NHS Trust, which will see ResApp DX piloted throughout the trust, initially in their outpatient respiratory clinic, but we're also looking at expanding to other parts of the NHS Trust. This is a major hospital in North Kent in the UK. In Asia, we're working with AlloDoctor, one of the largest telehealth providers in the world. And in emerging markets, we have some distributors. So we're working with Alara Health in Kenya and Sandrai International across a broad range of emerging markets. And finally, we also have partnerships with pharma companies. And so not only do these get us access to the market, so Janssen, for example, we're part of a multi-country clinical study in the US, Europe, Asia. In AstraZeneca, we're in a clinical study in Japan. So not only do we get access to the market, this is just really strong validation for ResApp's technology. These companies don't do business unless they have a very solid validation for the technology. So next slide, please. So I just want to talk about COVID-19. These are results that we released just over a week ago, and we really see COVID-19 as a really important commercial opportunity for us, but also a really strategic opportunity to accelerate basically the uptake of using cough to diagnose disease globally. We look at COVID through 3 different areas. We start with screening. So we see some opportunities there, obviously, of identifying COVID-19, instantly without the need for hardware, very scalable, doesn't have the cost of a rapid antigen or PCR test, and really just gives everyone the opportunity to have a test instantaneously. We can also have to manage people at home once they have COVID-19. Pneumonia, which is one of the diseases that we do diagnose in ResApp DX, is an important factor in managing people with COVID-19. And then there's the long-term effects of COVID-19 that we're also investigating from an R&D perspective. Next slide, please. So, many of you on this call will understand COVID-19. It's been in the news for a very long time now, but I thought I'd just put this up just to get some perspective on exactly what COVID-19 looks like. And I think the important thing that the important problem that we see is really this third point here, and that's that at the peak of the Omicron variant, Australians were waiting up to 7 days just to get a PCR test results. And that was after actually waiting in a queue, potentially in the rain or the hot sun, before they could even get tested. And we all know that the challenges that we had with rapid antigen testing and the unavailability of those. It's also an uncomfortable situation. Those of you who've had a PCR or rapid antigen test understand that you have to put a nasal swab up your nose to try to get a bit of virus effectively on that swab. And that is not only uncomfortable, it also significantly reduces the real world sensitivity of these tests. If that swab is not able to get a piece of virus, if you don't quite get it in the right spot in the back of your nose, then those tests are simply not going to be accurate. And so that's one of the real world challenges of this sort of lab-based testing. To give you an example, we're still having 20 million plus cases in the last few weeks, 70,000 deaths in the last 2 weeks. So this virus isn't going away. The world is starting to learn to live with it, but learning to live with it still means we're going to have to continue managing it. Next slide, please. So our clinical study, which we kicked off at the beginning of this year, late last year, we recruited over 700 participants across the US and India. Out of those 700 participants, we recruited over 400 positives. Importantly, what we did was we compared our result to a PCR test. So we didn't use a rapid antigen test. We didn't use self-reported COVID status. We used the gold standard PCR test to compare our cough-based algorithm against. Next slide, please. And so the results out of this test were really, really promising and really excellent, better than what we expected. So if we look at our results for sensitivity, and I'll go through exactly what sensitivity and specificity means on the next slide, but our sensitivity results were at 92%, closer to PCR. Sorry, can I just go back a slide? Closer to the PCR than rapid antigen. And as I said, rapid antigen in the real world is probably only 60 to 80%. Our specificity was lower, but it still provides us with a very useful tool. And I'll explain on the next slide exactly how that works. So let's say that you're using ResApp DX, our ResApp COVID test on 1,000 patients. And let's say that 5% of those patients have COVID-19. So these are the orange dots here. So let's first look at our 92% sensitivity. So next, please. So what that 92% sensitivity means is that we identify 46 people who are positive accurately. We miss 4, but you can imagine, this is still significantly better than the 60 or 70% sensitivity that rapid antigen test gives you. The next, please. So now if we look at specificity, so specificity tells you about the negatives. So on the specificity side, we identify the vast number of people who don't have COVID. So that's a really important fact, right? So if we say that you don't have COVID, you definitely don't have COVID. It's a very high accuracy for ruling out the disease. We do test a number of people who are false positives. So there are 190 people that we say, you might be positive. And so the next, please. So in this case, you can look. So these are the ones that we say are positive. So we say that 236 people receive a positive test result. We get some false positives. So this really says this group of people who ResApp says are positive for COVID need further testing. They need further testing to determine whether they are a true positive or if they're a negative. And next, please. But next bit is the real commercial value that ResApp provides. So out of that original cohort of 1,000 people, 764 people we say are negative. And we say it negative at 99.5% probability that they are negative. So this is very highly accurate. And for these people, we don't require any further testing. So what we've done is we've taken a population of 1,000 people who traditionally would require a rapid antigen or a PCR test. And now 764 of those people no longer require that testing and can go about their day. Next slide, please. So the benefits of this, obviously, it's smartphone based. We don't have any supply chain issues. It's fast, it's instant, and it's low cost. Next, please. It's not invasive. There's none of those swabs. It's cough zones only, and we're likely to see better compliance. You're not having to put that swab in just the right place to get a good result. Next, please. And as I said, it's resource sparing. So we've basically reduced the number of rapid antigen tests by 80%. So that's a huge number of savings for governments, for insurers, and for individuals. And next, please. And with that, we've got significant benefits for the environment. All of those rapid antigen tests are essentially biologically problems. So you can't just dispose of them in the bin. You're supposed to put them in the bag and dispose of them carefully. There's also all the plastic, etc. So it's a major benefits across the board for using a smartphone-based test. Next slide, please. So where are we going from here? So what we've run today has been a pilot demonstration trial. So this gives us a huge amount of confidence that we have a technology that works and that is accurate and has commercial value. But our next step is to run a double-blinded prospective clinical trial. And right now we're in discussions and we're starting the planning for that today. We're engaging with the regulatory bodies, so we must engage with TGA, with FDA, to ensure that we have the data that we need, the context that we need to get regulatory approval. Our history starts in pediatrics, so we obviously want to start looking at pediatrics as well, especially you've seen recently the importance of kids and the transmission of COVID-19 through kids. Obviously moving into patient monitoring and long COVID. But I think most importantly right now, we're in discussions with a number of parties to license or work with those parties to bring this product through to market and then have the greatest chance of having the biggest impact with this technology. So next slide, please. So thank you very much and happy to open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Tony. That's fascinating and certainly come a long way with those test results. We have a lot of questions here, so we'll talk through them. It's obviously a massive market, very convenient and very cost effective. Is the business model for a consumer to download the app and make a small payment?
Look, our focus here is getting it to market as a direct-to-consumer product. So absolutely, we expect consumers to be using the product to screen themselves for COVID, to work out whether they need rapid antigen testing or PCR testing, or whether they're free to go effectively. Our current model is looking for partnership partners to do that. So whether that is governments who may be able to provide it alongside a check-in app, whether it's corporates who you may want to fly in your airline and they may want to test you before you get on a plane. We're also talking to pharmaceutical companies, to technology companies, preloading on phones, etc. So there's a number of different opportunities to bring it to the market, and whether it's a user pays or an employer pays or a government pays, we're still looking at those different options.
Yeah, certainly, as I said, a lot more convenient and cost effective than walking out and down to the shop. There is a question here though: is a cough always associated with a COVID disease?
So no, I mean you can have COVID without cough, but that doesn't actually affect what we do. So we don't use cough as a symptom as such. So you don't require cough for us as a symptom for us to do an analysis. So you're able to provide a forced cough. Effectively, we use that maneuver, that process of coughing, even if it's a forced cough or a fake cough. We use that to get the air out of your lungs, get the sound out of your lungs, and extract the information. So we're not dependent on someone spontaneously coughing to perform our analysis.
I see. And in terms of TGA and FDA approval, and we've seen some things fast-tracked, particularly in regards to COVID. What are the next stages in that conversation?
Yep. So we've had some informal conversations previously leading up to this data. Right now, we have this data. We're putting together packages to send to TGA, FDA, and into Europe. That will be able to enable us to have meaningful conversations with the regulators, so that we can understand exactly what their requirements are, and then go and essentially execute on those requirements to bring the products to market.
And where are the competitors in this space? There's talk of respiratory. Is that right? Is there competitors in this space?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't classify respiratory as a competitor. Respiratory looks at management of asthma. So I guess quite a different segment of the market that we're looking at. Our focus primarily is acute presentation. So someone presenting with an acute condition, whether it's a cold or COVID, or whether it's an asthma exacerbation. Respiratory looks at wheeze, looks at managing that wheeze, which is a symptom of asthma. So very different spaces. Look, there are a number of I guess areas that the whole world is shifting towards this testing at home, and looking at how do we get these sort of clinical grade tests into people's home for whether it's flu, whether it's diabetes, whether it's all these different diseases. We've seen this shift during COVID. Look, we're the ones really leading the field for this cough-based analysis, and that's something we've focused on, and we think is by far, it gives us the ability to deliver on a smartphone, which we don't think anyone else has.
And so post those results, does the COVID application become your priority, given you've got sleep check and other avenues?
No, so we're still running a business across a number of different areas, and we always have. So we have Sleep Check as a business, a direct to consumer, but also looking at partnerships around sleep apnea screening. ResApp DX is primarily focused around the telehealth market, providing telehealth clinicians access to remote diagnosis. Our COVID algorithms actually fit into that product as well. We also have what we call our cough counter product, which we're working with pharmaceutical companies in clinical trials. And then there's the COVID screening product. So no, underlying all of these technologies is the same technology base. And then as we essentially productize each of these technologies, each of these products, we look for partners who are able to take those forward.
And there's a question here, Tony. Is there any chance any potential partner has flagged that they're willing to help to fund these sort of products?
Look, we're looking at all different options. I can say that over the last few months, we've had significant amount of interest from different partners with different opportunities. Whether it's funding product, whether it's funding product development, whether it's licensing, all of those different opportunities are being looked at by the board, and we're I guess investigating those and taking those forward.
Great, Tony. That's all we have time for. Fascinating to hear the story again and to watch your progress. Thanks for your time, and we'll follow with interest.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody.